Welcome back, fantastic friends and fans, to the fifth episode of the Fancast at 4 podcast. My name is Dan Bettenhausen, and I'm your host as we venture into the what-ifs of Marvel's first family, who will soon be appearing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With Spider-Man director Jon Watts set to direct the Fantastic Four, rumors and speculation are flying around as to who will be playing the comic book royalty. But what if a different director was behind the camera? And who might they cast? That is what we hope to explore in this podcast. If you are new to the podcast and want to hear a brief history of the Fantastic Four, you can check out our first episode, where guest Pat Bolfamonte provides a breakdown of each of the characters. With that said, let's dive in and meet this episode's guest. This week, I'm excited to have my friend Matt Thomas on the episode. Matt is the founder and host of Who Are They Real Entertainment on YouTube. Matt, welcome to the podcast. Anything else about yourself that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Just journalism major, working my way through life. Love doing the podcast stuff. I've loved all these people I've gotten to meet, like you and Quiz Show and Buck, over the last couple of years, and it's just been really cool, man. And admittedly, I will say I'm more of a DC guy than Marvel.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it is what it is.
That's okay. Hey, like I said, this show isn't about loyalty to one or the other. It's really just a fun exercise to get directors, talk about movies, fan cast, have some fun here. One question for you, if you don't mind. What got you excited and wanting to start your own channel? What are some of the pros, the downfalls, the things you've learned in the process as you've developed Who Are They?
So when I developed Who Are They, or as we call it for short, WAT, I was just starting to get back into school. And I was actually a critic when I was younger. I worked freelance for the Akron Beacon Journal at the ages of 10 and 11, doing movie reviews with my father, who was the critic at the time. So I kind of I had taken a couple years off of school. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to go back or not. And I stumbled on Collider and Christian Harloff. Yeah. And I saw that the AV kid in me, who always liked the audio video side, would still be able to do that, but with what I originally wanted to do. And then I'm like, you know what? I miss school kind of. And if I can do this, get my degree, do this, and so on and so forth, then that's what I want to do. So I got my ass back in school, and I have a semester left after this current semester. So I'm really excited. It's been a journey, but hey, it's better to have your degree nearly 10 years after you graduate high school than not at all.
Better late than never. And it's great when you can meld things you're passionate about together and do something that's hopefully, whether it's an extensive hobby, it's a career down the line, whatever it is, it's something that you're happy dedicating your time to, and you're not just kind of scratching one itch, but multiple. So I'm very happy that you get to do that.
I mean, it's nice having the tools of being able to do the audio and the video and the photography, and on top of being able to write as a journalist, because nowadays you need all those tools to be successful. So that was
I mean, I have a journalism degree as well. I got my master's in strategic communication, so that stuff comes naturally to me. But I'm still learning as I do this podcast how to do the audio editing. That is still very, very new process to me. And I'm enjoying doing it. It's always a great skill to have, but that is still a lot of baby steps I'm taking as we get this developed.
Yes.
Well, I think it's time to dive into the episode. Before we get to our fan casting, it's probably good we discuss who this director actually is.
Yes.
This director has 24 feature-length directorial credits in his filmography. He has 10 short films directed, 6 documentary feature films directed, along with various producer and acting credits. He has 1 Best Original Screenplay nomination, 1 Best Documentary nomination, 1 Best Director nomination, and 1 Best Picture nomination, 1 win for Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards. This director's work has explored race relations, colorism in the Black community, the role of media in contemporary life, urban crime and poverty, and other political issues. If you haven't guessed it yet, the director we are discussing this week is Spike Lee. Matt, what drew you to want to cast a film around Spike Lee?
So Spike Lee, outside of Kevin Smith, is my favorite filmmaker of all time. The stories he tells, the issues that he covers, talent he casts, he's able to pull something out of people that makes everything seem and feel more real. That's one of my favorite things about him. So with that in mind, I would have killed myself if I couldn't give Spike a little bit of love.
Yeah, I think this was the first one you were immediately drawn to when I shared the list of directors I had.
Oh yeah, you gave me that list immediately. I'm like, what's free? Oh, this one, yeah, nope, nobody else.
Boom, done.
It was literally within like a minute. I'm like, Spike Lee. You're like, really? I'm like, Spike. Just great. Don't question it, Spike.
Hey, no problem. That's the great thing about art. I will admit, for the longest time, Spike Lee had been a blind spot in my movie viewership. But over the last, I'd say 5-6 years, I've really done a bigger deep dive into it, and I'm the better for it as a film watcher.
So you know what's funny? My first Spike Lee film I ever saw, period, was and I didn't know this because when you're younger, you don't pay attention to who directors are or anything.
Right, definitely.
Was Inside Man.
Hey, me too. That is.
So my parents took me to, my dad being a film critic also, he took me to a press screening with him and I'm just like, this movie's cool, yo, this like, and then like for until like 3 or 4 years ago, I'd always told people my first Spike Lee film was He Got Game, because I caught the name. I'm like, yo, who's this Spike Lee guy? I like this. And I look at it and on IMDb, I'm like, wait, he didn't.
Wait, what? No, definitely. Inside Man is also, I believe, my first Spike Lee film as well. I was actually watching it while I was working today, just in preparation for the episode, because it'd been a long time since I rewatched it. But I think that's actually a great transition point to discuss the segment I like to call 4 Fantastic Films. Each of us will go through our 4 favorite Spike Lee films. And Matt, I'll give you the honors of going first. What would you say are your 4 favorite Spike Lee films?
Well, I'll cheat here, and that is Inside Man makes this top 4. Malcolm, it just nudges out Malcolm X. If Malcolm X didn't feel like its runtime at times, Malcolm X would be here. But Malcolm X covers a lot, and it feels long too. I watched it for the first time about 3 or 4 years ago after avoiding it for the longest. Spike Lee kind of helped me embrace being Black, because I'm mixed, and I grew up in a predominantly white area, and I was always too Black for the white kids, too white for the Black kids. So I just kind of floated in the middle, let my interest be my interest, and it worked for a time being. But as you get older and you're trying to like establish who you are, you got to embrace something. And seeing everything that goes on in the real world and whatnot kind of hit me hard. And it was at that time I really started to dive into Spike's filmography and embrace his films and learn more about myself and my personal beliefs. And Spike helped me discover that about myself. So it was really important to me that I embrace who I was and just embrace being Black, because I never embraced being Black. I never embraced being white. I used to tell in high school, I'd tell people I was African American because I was half and half. But at a certain point, you realize in life that you got to check one of those boxes. And it's not, I know people aren't going to see how I look, but it's not like people are going to think I'm white if I say I'm white. So it comes down to, what are people going to see when they see me? And I'm a Black man, and I need to embrace that, and I need to embrace what comes along with that. But I'll cheat, and the first movie is Inside Man.
No, that's great. I mean, again, there's something to be said about the first movie of a director you see too, and the imprint that has on you. I'm gonna butt in here. It's also on my list as well. It's also on my list as well. I mean, mostly for that reason, though. I think it's a great heist movie. I think it's a very underrated performance from Denzel and from Clive Owen.
I love the Easter eggs, past films in there too, like Sal's Pizzeria.
Yes, 100%. So no, that is also on my list, and I think it is. I think in a lot of ways it is very Spike Lee movie, but it's not something you'd expect.
It's not his typical, like, that's part of the reason I love The Five Bloods, which doesn't make the list, but I will talk about this one.
Yeah, that's right. That's fine. No problem.
It's not his typical genre. His typical genre is more so like the Black Klansman, is the Mo Better Blues, School Days. She got like there's a ton of films that fall into, oh yeah, that sounds like a normal Spike Lee film.
Right.
This doesn't, when you hear this, you don't think Spike Lee. You like, just when you think about Miracle Santa Anna, you don't think about Santa Spike Anna, Lee. Santa Anna, thank you.
No problem,
you don't think about that's a Spike Lee joint. It's like,
right.
Oh, it's just like, no, it's just you're like, wait, Spike Lee directed? No, he couldn't have, because that doesn't seem like his type of genre. But Spike has shown over the last 20 years he's not confined to that one genre, and it's like,
he certainly has things he likes doing, but he has shown time and time again that he is capable of going beyond that. And that, I mean, I think that's the mark of a true director and an artist to, in some ways, stick to what you know because you're good at it, but also, showing off a little and saying, I don't have this one tool in my toolbox.
Exactly. He's just an overall great storyteller, and that's part of the reason why I love him.
Yep. What's the next one on your list?
I'm going in backwards order. So number 4 is cool. Inside Man. Number 3 is I'm going to swap these. Number 3 is Black Klansman. Black Klansman. Black Klansman was just a reminder, because Spike is very similar to Spielberg, and not Spielberg, Tarantino, in the fact that you don't get a film from him every year. No. You get one like every few years. Right. Spielberg, you get one every year. Yeah. That's like, no.
It's an event.
He's very meticulous and decides when he wants to put something out. So there might be a 2-3 year gap in between his last film and his next film. Black Klansman, I felt was his peak almost. Like, that was, I felt like I was watching original Spike Lee, like the Do the Right Thing, where when he's covering race issues, he's covering them from a place and includes history in them to help them hit home hard enough to where people will, like, some people will be like, oh, you beat me over the head with it. No, he does it subtly in the right way, where it's like, no, this happened, you need to accept it. And I love that. It's very impressive. No, you're fine. It's very impressive to be able to do that, but also keep an audience engaged at the same time. And Black Klansman does a fantastic job about that, while telling a somewhat extreme Hollywood version of a true story.
Right.
But it also gives us, that's the movie that helps John David Washington really break on the scene. I know a lot of people not a lot of people knew him from HBO's Ballers. I did, but everybody knew who John David Washington was after that film.
All I was going to add was that, to your point about his subtlety, is that he doesn't make you listen. He convinces you to listen with his films. And yeah, I think it still baffles me that his only Academy Award win and his only Best Picture nomination come with Black Klansman. For the span of his career, it took this great movie, don't get me wrong, it is a great movie, to get that recognition. He had some other nominations previously, but his only Best Picture, again, nomination, and his only win, which was for Best Original Screenplay, came with Black Klansman.
Yeah, I got some issues with that.
Yeah.
My number 1 deserved a Best Picture nomination, but we'll get to that.
So I will also tell you, as we go through, this was also on my list as well. So I don't think there's much more to say. I will just say this Black Klansman was also, it's my number 3 as well. So,
oh wow. We're hitting it right. You're hitting it right, Dan. I appreciate it.
To be fair, Inside Man was my number 2 on the list, but I figure you're the guest. I will let you go first, and we'll see if your next one is on my list.
I don't know if the next one will be, but my number 2 Spike Lee film of all time is He Got Game. I'm growing up big basketball fan, but basketball is just the backdrop for the film. I love the father-son story. It perfectly reflects the relationships between fathers and sons, fathers who are actually present in their sons' lives in the Black community, because growing up, you have Black fathers especially try to push their sons a little bit harder because Black men are behind the 8 ball a lot of the time. And especially when you're that gifted athletically and they see it at a young age, to try to push you and push you to where you don't have to worry about it in life. Is it a little bit stereotypical? Arguably, yes. But it's still real. It's something I've seen with family members, friends growing up. So seeing that pushing of Jesus to be where he had to be, and then even after Jake is incarcerated for accidentally killing his wife, see how Jesus used those lessons he learned from him is just incredible and beautiful. And I think that's where people miss out on the subtlety of that film, because he still used what his father taught him, whether or not he claims he hated his father for accidentally killing his mother while he was drunk. But to take care of his sister and everyone else, the character of Jesus is just beautiful and a great representation of a young Black man who has that decision to go through.
We're 3 for 3. If He Got Game is actually my favorite Spike Lee film. And I, on top of everything you said, I think it's a fascinating examination of and condemnation of the recruitment process and all
and the criminal justice system.
Yes, 100%. There is one shot that still sticks to me, and maybe people catch it because it's actually just the shot of a basketball court that even I the first time I watched it was maybe about a year ago, to be quite honest.
Oh, Dan, you waited a while to catch that.
I told you, and Spike Lee's been a big blind spot for me. So COVID gave me a lot of time to do some catch up. So there's one shot that still sticks to me. It's when he's visiting what's like Tech U, the school where he's getting surrounded by all these women and getting hustled around. The coach talks with him and they show him the highlight reel and whatnot, and everything that could be given to him if he goes to this school. But there's actually one shot of the center court, and it's of a vulture. We never knew what the school's mascot was, but you see this picture of it, which is assumingly a vulture or a condor or something. I'm like, this is just a great way to say, as much as they're showering with you love now, they're just going to pick at your carcass later. And that has stuck with me since seeing it a year ago. And just another, on top of the reasons you outlined, another reason, and going to the subtlety of Spike Lee, why I think this movie is fantastic.
Exactly. No, 3 for 3. Let's see if we can go 4 for 4.
I doubt it. I highly doubt, because we have my number 4, and it is a wild card. It is admittedly a wild card.
Okay, well, let's find out. I'm guessing your number 4 is Old Boy if it's a wild card.
No. You'll see.
My number 1 that I'm listing out right now is Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
For those people who aren't familiar with Watt, back when the George Floyd stuff happened, we did a watch along for Do the Right Thing because I wanted to take the time to educate people on this. Isn't something like some people don't realize, like, they're just being woke in cinema now, this, that, and the other. Really? Because here's a movie from the 1980s that covers this exact topic, and it's a hard topic, and it takes place all in one day. It just shows you how one moment, just how one thing can just cause this entire outrage. And I love the Radio Raheem character, Bugging Out, played by Giancarlo Esposito, is just hilarious and phenomenal. And occasionally Chris Anthony Lopez, when he decides to do his hair all weird, looks like him. But just that is the peak of Spike Lee's filmmaking ability to me, because that movie, you don't realize what it's about until that one thing happens. It's like, oh no, it's just a hot day in New York. Sure, there's some tension between the cops and the Black neighborhood. All right. Then you got the white pizza owners who everybody goes to their shop for food because it's the best pizza around. You can buy it by the slice. Cool. One son's subtly racist, or not subtly racist. One is trying to be friends and make good, and then you got a father who tries to be indifferent. Buttons get pushed, hot summer day, and everything boils over and the entire situation explodes. resulting in the death of Radio. It just shows you how things like that can just happen in an instant. And that is why I love that film, because that's real to me. And ultimately, it's nothing Spike Lee has done since his match. That was when I saw that. My father showed it to me around the time the Tamir Rice stuff went down.
Yeah.
Because I was high school. I was like, I want to say like 16, 17. And that's, like I said, Spike Lee helped me embrace being Black. And that film was honestly the start of that journey. And it kind of put things in a little bit of a different perspective for me. So having it have that effect on me, it's like, no. This is it. It's one of my top 5 favorite films of all time, honestly. And I'm upset it took me so long to buy the Blu-ray, but I'm a college student. I'm broke. I'm cheap, and I waited until it was like $12 4K Blu-ray. Go ahead.
No, and admittedly, I wanted to put it on my list. I couldn't in good conscience, because it's been a long time since I watched it, and I'll say I probably wasn't as socially conscious when I watched it. So I need to give it another watch, and I'm certain it probably would make the list. I am certain it would. It's just from the time I watched it, was honestly, it's probably 10 maybe 15 years ago. So it's been some time since I've watched it, and not that I'm a different person now than I was then. I think just growing up and learning more and meeting new people, making new friends, listening to people, and trying to be open-minded. Like I think the movie would just hit me different now than when I first watched it, and just like, oh, it's a movie. I wasn't taking in. I was just watching a movie at the point when I watched it.
See, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. When you're younger, certain things don't hit you
like
they do when you're older, because, like, I'll tell you this: 10-year-old Matt might have been bored with this newest Batman movie. He wasn't like, why was it so long? 27-year-old Matt's like, yo, you could have given me 2 more hours and I would have loved it. So I get it.
So I don't want to talk again, because it was my number 4 movie. I don't want to talk about it too heavily, but I wanted to recognize a different side of Spike Lee that we haven't talked about. And it's actually one he won an Emmy for, David Byrne's American Utopia.
Okay.
He won an Emmy for a Best Variety Program, and it is considered essentially a one of his feature documentaries. And it introduced me to the music of David Byrne. The direction was engaging, and all in all, it was fun. It was the most fun I've had in a long time watching.
You weren't lying. This is a serious
wild card. And again, ask me in a few months, it might change, but a lot of it, I wanted to recognize something so far in left field of what he's done as well that also has been recognized. And that's why I chose this one in I'd say my top 4. Again, there are plenty on here that I need to rewatch, plenty I want to give another opportunities to consume and take in. But I'm just happy three of our 4 were the same.
I'll tell you what, probably wouldn't be the same if we were talking about Jeff right now. Woo!
Well, it's funny. There have been directors we've talked about in past episodes that have had much smaller filmographies, and me and the guest have had very drastically different lists. Maybe one similarity across the board. So it's great that with a director who has 30 credits to his name between 30 plus credits to his name with feature length, documentary, shorts, so on, that these 3 of our 4 impacted each of us so closely. Yes. Maybe for varying reasons, but still, I think that's a great.
And like you said, if you do the right thing, was like, if you had seen it recently, might have made the list.
100%.
Like I'm willing to give you 4.
Hey, like I said, honestly, if I find some time this weekend, I might rent it and give it that watch again.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So we've talked about our favorite movies. I think now it's time to dive into what the listeners are here to listen to, and that's our fan castings. So now I'm excited to do our segment, our Fan Cast at 4. how we're doing it going forward. We've mixed it up from maybe some earlier episodes. Rather than alternating choices, each going through our Reed Richards, our Sue Storms, so on and so forth, I'm going to have Matt go through his entire casting of Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, Dr. Doom, give his rationales, why he chose them, and then I'm going to go through my list. Just a heads up for you listeners who are like, oh, Matt didn't follow the rules. He had asked previously if some of his choices could not be Spike Lee actors who have worked with Spike Lee previously. I'm like, yeah, sure. The goal is to have fun. If he's passionate about these choices, that's what I want. And none of these actors have been in the MCU in major roles. So that's really rule number 2, and we're good. So 1 out of 2, not so bad. But with that said, Matt, I'm gonna throw the casting over to you.
Well, I only somewhat broke the mold.
Yes, that's fair. That's fair. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
But I will say this: part of the reason I went for that is because of who we've seen Spike work with, and 2 of those actors are on this list, and you'll get where I'm going with a certain casting later on. But it was also just taking into account some of the stuff I've watched and Spike's style and the skill of some of these actors, because I'll defend a little bit more when we get to those top 3, because those last 3 are going to be where that mold is just cracked open.
Hey, that's fine.
But I'll start off with the bottom one, Dr. Doom, okay. Victor Von Doom, whatever you want to call him. He has many names. For this, I went with the Spike Lee oldie. Well, technically oldie now, I guess, but a goodie,
a veteran,
and
now.
that is that's Adam Driver. We know how villainous he can be because of Star Wars Saga, right, as Kylo Ren, and I'd like to see him in a role where he doesn't have to flop back to being a hero. I'm one of the few defenders of Rise of Skywalker. Still don't think that should have happened. But seeing how he was seeing films like The Last Duel, where he was the villain of that movie, seeing how he handled being a undercover cop who had to act like a racist in Black Klansman, stuff like that. I was like, Driver in general has so much nuance, but based off of Star Wars and those other 2 things I just named, he can play a villain easily, and he sells it. Like, you can buy him as a hero or a villain or somewhere in between, which is what Dr. Doom is at times. So with that in mind, I was like, yo, you know what? Adam Driver is Doom, period. And he's young enough still. And all of these people I named are all within mid-30s to late 20s. So
yeah. I mean, it's never a bad idea to cast Adam Driver. Just be real.
Right. It tells you one thing: the script's at least good.
Yes.
Unless he's already been under contract.
and when you look at something like The Last Duel, which again, a severely underrated movie, you all should watch. Yes, it's great.
It should have been nominated for Jodie Comer, got robbed of Best Actress. Should have been nominated for Best Picture. Just Disney buried that, and it still pisses me off.
Yeah, I'm with you. My point being, he does such a good job playing a villain who thinks he's in the right, who thinks he's the good guy. And I think that is a very key aspect of Doom in certain comic book iterations as well. And I think if that's where you're going, I'm excited to hear your pitch to see if we tap into that. So no, again, never bad casting Adam Driver. Who's your next cast?
This is where I still stick to the mold, and my Ben Grimm's last thing goes to none other than the great Paul Walter Hauser.
There you go. Interesting.
A lot of people defend casting colorblind and this, that, and the other. Here's the thing. To me, Ben Grimm is one of a few characters you can never colorblind cast, because there are 2 things important to his character. 1, he's Jewish. 2, his big baby blue eyes. So, keeping with that, I was like, I could never cast, even as a black man, can't bring myself to cast someone who's black as Ben Grimm. I was like, all right, who could pull off the seriousness but still have that gruff sounding voice and the comedic side to it? And there's only one person who came to mind, and that was Paul Walter Hauser. And I'm like, oh, he's worked the Spike, so that's good. At least I'm not going to tear things apart. But Paul Walter Hauser is honestly one of the most underrated actors right now. Like for comedic side, look at him as Stingray. Look at him in Cruella. He's so funny, and he makes it seem natural. And all you want to do is laugh and have a good time when he's in those roles. But then you look at something like Richard Jewell or Black Klansman, and even the Five Bloods, where he's can play the more serious role inside of things. And I think to play Ben Grimm, you need to have that nice bit of balance. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's the right cast. Some people be like, well, he's fat. So look at Michael Chiklis. We're not going to act like Michael Chiklis was the peak of human form.
Yeah, and if we are going, depending on your pitch, if you are going full rock creature Ben Grimm, he's full rock creature CGI.
Yeah,
who cares?
Exactly.
Who cares? Yeah, I mean, Twitter threats aside that he's made to people, I think this is a wonderful choice. Yes. I'm interested to see where he fits in the whole scope of your pitch. And I think one kind of stereotype or cliche is that it's easy for like comedic actors to delve into the drama more than vice versa. And I think we see that though with Paul Walter Hauser. And outside of his self-deprecation and his humor, he does have an inner rage that we've seen, especially in something like a Cobra Kai as Stingray.
Yes.
So he covers a lot of ground on who we've seen Ben Grimm be as a character, whether it's movies, comics,
precisely,
what have you. So no, another great choice.
Now, the next two choices are from a little show called Riverdale, but one actually has a much better credit to his name, thankfully. And my Johnny Storm is Eli Goree, who played Muhammad Ali in One Night in Miami, or Cassius Clay, if you want to go that way. So to me, this was someone who One Night in Miami feels like a Spike Lee film. Like it's the type of story he would tell. It's the type of film. It's his style, and I feel like Regina, that queen that she is, looked to how films of this have been done in the past. And it's like, let's take this and this. And I loved it. And I'm like, you know what? What better way to give a man who was in what felt like a Spike Lee joint than represent him in a Spike Lee directed Fantastic Four film? And I did use Riverdale a little bit when casting this, because he did get to show off even though he got to show off this in One Night in Miami, you get to see more of that hothead when he's playing Mad Dog on Riverdale. And it's just like, all right, yeah, no, everybody just knew him as the black kid who was on Riverdale before One Night in Miami. And it was like, yo, this kid's a good actor. I'm like, yeah, I know. There's a couple good actors on that show, but unfortunately, it's on a schlock show that I can't stop watching.
Unfortunately, it's Riverdale. No,
I want to see him get an opportunity like this, especially because everybody was talking their head off about him when One Night in Miami came out, and they've said nothing since.
No. And you're talking about Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, one of the rightly deserved hotheads in boxing. Like, he backed up the talk. And with Johnny Storm, it's not only is he a fiery superhero, he's a fiery personality. Exactly. If you can play Muhammad Ali, you can play Johnny Storm. Exactly. So and played Muhammad Ali, he did. So inspired choice.
He embodied him.
Yes, definitely. So despite the stigma that Riverdale might put on you, I still think that's a great choice.
Yeah, I'm really gonna have to defend this next choice. For my Sue Storm, we're going to talk about another actress who I think she's one of the few actors who needs to get off that show as quick as possible, because she's more talented than what that show is. Yeah. And that is Vanessa Morgan, who plays Tony Topaz in Riverdale. Her and Madeline Petch and Camila Mendez, please all hop off that show as quickly as possible, because you're way better than this. But I still watch it. But
I gave up after season 2. Admittedly, I watched it, but I gave up after season 2. I can't
stop watching. It's so bad, but I can't stop. I watch to see how bad it is. It's like,
hey, that's fair. That's fair.
Like, there's only two, in my opinion, there's only like 2 good CW shows left, and that is Superman and Lois and Naomi, which is a brand new show, so that can fall off in season 2 for all.
The Flash was so good, and then it's so bad. And no, that's how I am with the Flash. I still watch despite its terribleness.
See, I wait till it's on Netflix now. I wait till it's on Netflix.
Good call. But side note, Superman and Lois is wonderful.
Yes, I remember we did that show with Bucky.
Yes, we did.
I think that's how we met, actually.
It probably was. The Schmo Me the Money Superman and Lois review. Go check it out.
But Vanessa Morgan is I couldn't bring myself to do what the Josh Trank fan Forstick did, which was, let's do adoption. No, just make them black, and if people have make them both black, and if people have issues with it, so be it. This is an MCU. I will say that right now. In my mind, this is an MCU's tale, because Kang the Conqueror is a descendant of Reed Richards. So let's have at least one of the couple be black, and that was kind of like that's why I'm like, all right, let's go Black Johnny and Black Sue, and we'll have a white Reed. But
cool.
It was important to me. I think she's much better than Riverdale, and it's again another actor who needs that big opportunity to step out and show what they can do. And she's very naturally beautiful, which I know a lot of people's things with Sue is she's got this great natural beauty to her. You need to make her attractive. Okay, let's not pretend like she isn't. So
yeah, no, I think knowing her from the show, I agree with you. Very beautiful girl. And again, sometimes actors just need a shot and at that next step. So this reminds me back when we did the Tarantino episode and I cast Austin Butler as Johnny Storm. This is an actor who was mostly CW stuff. He got a small role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now he's playing frickin' Elvis. Like, you need that one opportunity. And if Sue Storm is it for Vanessa Morgan, if she shows the chops to be in this big blockbuster as one of the most iconic characters in Marvel history with Sue Storm, give her a shot. Like I said, just because you are in what might be considered trash TV doesn't mean you're a trash actress. So, and like you said, you've noted 3 actors on the show who you think are much better than what they're given to work with. And I trust your judgment. If Vanessa Morgan is it, great.
Rarely is there ever people in bad stuff who I can normally point out like 1 or 2, but when I sit here, I'm like, there's like 4 or 5 cast members that I can sit here and say they're all better actors than this. Then that tells you that's just a poorly written show. Or
it's written as intended, and that's just a shame too.
Yeah. Which it is what it is. You gotta roll with the punches. Am I right?
Yep.
My Mr. Fantastic. This has been my Mr. Fantastic casting forever. Honestly, this is the one man I want to see as him. No, it's not John Krasinski. No, when I think about a Fantastic Four film, because ever since the Fox MCU acquisition, in my mind, I can only ever think MCU Fantastic Four. And to me, considering this is the first family for Marvel, and you have to realistically have these people be young enough to where this can still look relatively young 10 to 15 years down the line, that's kind of where all these castings came from. And for my Mr. Fantastic, I went with Taron Egerton.
Great choice.
I think he is arguably one of the best actors in Hollywood right now. He was robbed of an Academy Award win, not just nomination, but win as Elton John, because if you're going to give Rami Malek the win for Freddie Mercury the year before, and you don't even nominate Taron, who blew his performance out of the water.
Yeah, no. I could go on a half-hour diatribe about this, how Taron Egerton got robbed, and I think due to Rami Malek, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I agree. 110%. People are like, no, we gave you your actor, we gave you your biopic singer.
We'll give you it back. You can take Rami. Give us Taron, please.
Right.
And I mean, it's such a shame because I love Queen too. I mean, Elton John's great. Yeah. I love Queen, but man, see, I can't. I will go into a diatribe that we do not have time for.
Yo, I'm right there with you, Dan. I honestly am right there with you.
Yes, Taron Egerton, Mr. Fantastic.
but he's a couple years older than Vanessa, just a couple years younger than Adam, just the perfect age, right? Like a couple years younger than Paul Walter Hauser. They're all, so I want to say the youngest person in this cast is 27, and I think Adam Driver's somewhere either 35 or 37. So like it's a nice little spread, and it all just blends together perfectly for early 30s average age.
And I mean, his star is ascending so much. I think despite Kingsman 2, which I don't think was that good.
I'm actually one of the few defenders.
Oh, yeah.
The Kingsman, I will burn at the stake anyone who says that's a good film.
Oh, you didn't like the first one?
Bad. I hated the Kingsman.
Did you? Interesting. I mean, that's why art is interesting. Like I said, it's not my favorite. I enjoyed it a lot more than the second one. Wouldn't say it's my favorite franchise. Regardless, Taron Egerton's a great actor. A performance I think got overlooked of his, Eddie the Eagle. I think that's a film more people need to see too. Yes. So, yes, Taron Egerton, great choice, and I think he's an actor that is destined to be in the MCU at some point.
Yes, whether it's Wolverine or Mr. Fantastic. I would prefer Mr. Fantastic, but I'll take Wolverine.
I could even see him as Cyclops.
I could see him being a good Cyclops, but everybody wanted him as Wolverine for years. Right. That's why I went with him.
And we'll just poach him for Mr. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, great cast. So just running through again, your Dr. Doom, Adam Driver, your The Thing, Ben Grimm, Paul Walter Hauser. You have Eli Gorey as Johnny Storm, Vanessa Morgan as Sue Storm, and Taron Egerton as your Mr. Fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, I'm excited to hear your pitch, but before we get to that, I'm going to go through my list. And since you went backwards, Doom through Reed, I will do the same. And I'm for my Dr. Doom. We're actually going to be returning to an actor not discussed in your cast, but just discussed previously. This actor was in 2013's Old Boy and 2014's The Sweet Blood of Jesus. We are going with Freddie Mercury himself, Rami Malek, as Dr. Doom. We've seen him pull the villain card before, especially in like recently No Time to Die. He's an actor that I don't think would have an issue if he were required to wear a mask regularly, and he just is creepy enough to be Dr. Doom, to be completely honest with you. I don't know if I need to go through much more of his filmography to justify this choice. He has great villain written all over his face. So
I agree, and he's one of those few actors who can act like you bring up. You don't think he'd have issues wearing a mask, and I agree because he uses his body. When you look at him in No Time to Die, his body movements, how he contorted his body in certain ways, just like it was creepy, it was disturbing, and it sold it for me. I know his performance is very like divisive, but I personally loved that performance, so yeah. I agree with you there.
No, and despite us crapping on his performance as Freddie Mercury,
it's a good performance. It's just got blown out of the water less than a year later.
Yeah, when you have someone like Taron Egerton actually singing the music and not lip sync. See, I'm doing it again. I am doing it again.
Hey, this one's on you. This one's on you.
And this is my show. I can do whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to my next choice. So for Ben Grimm, throughout these episodes, I've really trying hard to do what you had said: cast a Jewish actor or one who could play a Jewish character as well. The blue eyes I haven't focused on so much because there's CGI and stuff as well. But
that's fair.
But I did actually go with a black actor. He was, and I will explain in my pitch how this comes into play. But he was in 2008's Miracle at St. Anna. My Ben Grimm is Omar Benson Miller.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about off the top of my head. I'm trying to
let me.
Oh, yes, that is actually a great choice. I loved him. Funny enough, John, he was with John David Washington on Ballers.
Yeah,
loved him in that. All you have to say is he was the GM for the Rams and Ballers. Oh, right. He was Les Snead. Got it.
No, I think he's someone who he's been in so much stuff, but he's never really had that big role, that big, especially in some like a feature length in a feature length movie. I think he could knock it out of the park as Ben Grimm. I think he has the chops to pull off the dramatic, the humor, the heart. Yes. Again, everything we've talked about so consistently with what it takes
Ballers
to be.
Shows that off, just saying.
Yes, yeah. Admittedly, I've never watched Ballers, but don't give me that look. Our listeners cannot see that shocked face you're making. But
here, I'll say this: it's not a great show, but the acting in it and Dwayne The Rock Johnson,
yeah, phenomenal. And that's what I've heard. And that, again, that's from what I've read, from what I've studied up on him. I think he could certainly be a Ben Grimm. Any other thoughts on this choice?
No, that's a great choice. I'm like, that's a great choice.
For my Johnny Storm, the antagonizer of said Ben Grimm, I went back to, well, I guess not back to, I'm going to 2018's Black Klansman, and I'm going with Corey Hawkins.
Oh, Corey.
I mean, I think he is just someone, when you think Johnny Storm, and if we are going with a black actor to fill this role, he is the first person that really jumped into my head.
I mean, even him as Benny in The Heights.
Yes.
Just that opening number, he's antagonizing Uznavi. Good choice. Good choice. I respect it.
I appreciate it. He's another up-and-comer. Star is certainly on the rise. He's done action before. I believe he was in like that 24 reboot.
Yeah, he did. He was the star of the reboot of 24.
So he can do action. He can be humorous. He
dramatic.
Can be, yes, 100%. And he can be that kind of brotherly antagonizing force to Ben Grimm too. And so that's why I went with Corey Hawkins.
Respect.
Now, Sue Storm, I probably went with more of a conventional choice, certainly a bigger name. She's been in two of Spike Lee's films, 2004's She Hate Me and 2008's Miracle at St. Anna. I'm going with Scandal's own Kerry Washington.
You know what? Funny enough, who was she in the original Fantastic Four movie?
Oh, she was
Ben Grimm's girlfriend.
Yes, Ben Grimm's girlfriend. Thank you.
But I like that choice. I'll probably get on Lauren Haney or Laura Haney, but she was also in Homecoming, so that wouldn't.
Alicia Masters. Sorry, there's going to be people listening yelling at me why I couldn't think of this. Alicia Masters. She was Alicia Masters in the original Fantastic Four movie. Well, she's getting
Easter egg.
She's getting a credits boost, and she's going to be the Sue Storm. I feel like a broken record. Kerry Washington's great.
Yes, she is.
I was watching some, I don't know, it was a BuzzFeed video or some YouTube video of performances that went under the radar, and her performance in Django came up.
Yes.
Like that scene where Leo as Calvin Candy's yelling at them, and
she barely speaks a line in that movie, right. And her performance is amazing.
100%. She's got wit. She's got action gravitas. She has the dramatic chops. I think she'd be a good older sister influence on Corey Hawkins's Johnny Storm. I don't really see a downside to casting, at least in my pitch that I have, a Kerry Washington as a Sue Storm. Last but certainly not least is my Mr. Fantastic, my Reed Richards. And going back to an actor we have talked about, and now I'm going back to 2018's Black Klansman. I'm going with John David Washington.
Everyone I know, I'm not going to lie, most people I know, ever since we found out King was going to be played by Jonathan Majors, it's like, all right, he's because going back to what I said, why I made my Sue Storm and Johnny Storm black is if he's black, you want him to come from someone who was black. So I know people like John David Washington. Some people have said to me, Lakeith wouldn't be a bad one either.
No. I went with, I was thinking Lakeith. I went with John David Washington mostly because of, because of Spike Lee's history with his father. I think Spike Lee would love to be able to turn John David Washington into his father, like they'll give his son the same legacy that he gave his father. And even if it's with a superhero, I admittedly, I hated Tenet. I'll be quite honest with you, but I thought
love Tenet.
I like that we have such drastic movie preference. Wait.
Agree on Spike Lee.
Everything else has been drastically different. But he was great in it. Like I said, performance was good. It was not due to his performance that I disliked the movie. But I think he certainly showed the stoicism, the drive, the kind of one-trackness that you would get from a Reed Richards, and from what we've seen with Black Klansman, from again Tenet, and various other things we've been in it. I think he would really knock it out of the park, not only as the leader of the Fantastic Four, but as what it takes to be Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, I agree. If I had stayed in the mold, he was actually my choice, but I'm like, but Taron, like it's I'm a one-track mind guy for a lot of stuff. And some stuff works out, like Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano. Other stuff, not so much, but we're not going to talk about those instances.
Well, but what I do want to start talking about now that we've cast, each of us has cast our Fantastic Four films directed by Spike Lee, it's time to get into the pitches of the movies they're going to be in. So before we dive into that, I do have two questions for you, Matt. First, is your film an origin film?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, I think you alluded to it previously, but is it part of the MCU?
Yes.
Awesome.
Without a doubt.
I am excited to see Spike Lee take on the MCU. So whenever you're ready, give us your Fantastic Four pitch.
So a lot of people have alluded to the possibility of the Fantastic Four coming out of the quantum realm and not having aged in some pocket of it, unlike Janet Van Dyne, who did age. And that when I was coming up, that's kind of what sat with me. So it is an origin film, and ultimately how they get together, how the powers form, the relationship with Victor, and Victor ends up being frozen in time. I didn't figure out how, but I'm like, I don't need a light pitch. I don't need to go into severe detail. But that way, later on, when they come out of the quantum realm, Victor is there. But I figured it taking place in the late 60s, between late 60s, mid 70s, would be the perfect time, because just knowing what they would have gone through racially, we know Spike Lee could cover that, and it's something I felt like we started to get a little bit of in Black Panther, and I'd like to see Marvel add more to that, cover some of those tougher issues.
Yeah.
So when you have an interracial couple at a time where being an interracial couple still isn't the best or looked on the best, and Johnny being a hothead can get himself into trouble easily by talking to a married man's wife who just happens to be white. Just little instances like that. I'm like, I know Spike Lee can do this movie and give me something that hits intellectually, but we saw in the Five Bloods, he can do action too. Like, that was his first real foray. Granted, there's Miracle at St. Anna, but that was more war, whereas Five Bloods, you have a couple action sequences that are interesting, and those heartfelt moments and those hard moments are ultimately what drove me to these actors and the story Spike Lee can tell. Because I'm going to be honest, Spike Lee can tell me a story about acceptance and the struggles of an interracial couple, struggles of a Jewish man, because let's be honest, there's still those issues there around that time, and a young Black man just trying to find his way in the world, all within them learning how to use their powers. And that would be really interesting to me. And then you basically cap it off with, of course, the fight with Victor, where he somehow ends up frozen in time. We've seen people get frozen in time before, so it's not like it couldn't happen. And then they end up in the quantum realm after, just by Reed trying to figure out how to get rid of their powers, as we've seen before. And then they get stuck in there, and it just happens. And I know it's not the best pitch, because honestly, there's been a lot going on in life right now, and I'm like, all right, I'm like, what makes me happy? And seeing what would make me happy with Spike Lee doing it. I'm like, covering these issues and making it work within the MCU ultimately is what the most important thing to me is. And I think he would be one of the few directors out there that would be able to do that.
No, I think that's great. And one thing that came to mind is this is a second opportunity to do a person or people out of time thing, but from a different time period.
Yes.
So rather than Captain America, who came from like World War II era, now we have this team that was stuck in the quantum realm and hadn't aged, but were from the 60s, 70s, dealing with all these social issues and coming and seeing the world as it is today.
And seeing how some issues have changed in the
right.
sequel film, or some have stayed the same, and how some are being revived, things
exactly.
like that. It's just the sequel ultimately is what completely solidified me on this idea, because I'm like, yo, that's something we got to see Cap do, and I think those stories are what resonate the best. I like those kind of stories. Like, people give Captain America and Winter Soldier a flack. I don't as much, because if people knew the behind the scenes that they had to rewrite like the back half of that series due to COVID, they'd know why the back half is a little bit more sloppy. But it covered some tough stuff, and one of my favorite things in the MCU because of that. My other favorite piece in the MCU is Black Panther. For what reason? Ryan Coogler covered some tough stuff. I guess as a black man, I can cop out and say that resonates with me, both those stories, but it's the truth, because I don't get to, outside of independent films, I don't really get to see those stories told on a major front. Like, it's cool to see, like, I have a godson, he's 7 years old. I took him to see Black Panther, and he was like 3 at the time, and he was just like, hey, that's me, because there's not a lot of those characters, and I that's why when you see Kang is being played by a black man, you're like, all right, no, somebody in that relationship has to be black, because that representation matters. And what better way to balance it out by having it be Sue and Johnny are black, and you get a nice even balance of representation for the most part on that team. So there's a lot of stuff. If I start, I'm not gonna lie, I can start feeling waterworks well up. But if I start going a little bit too deep, I'm gonna end up crying. I don't want to do that.
That's fine. That's fine.
But
what you're comfortable with.
The representation matters, and
totally
being able to create stories for the mass audience that shows we're not too far separated from this, and if we don't change our ways, we'll end up repeating what, like, in today's society, Republicans are looking to get rid of, are taking a look at, should we still have interracial marriage? And it's like, it's 2022. I'm mixed. My girlfriend, soon to be fiance, is white. Like, it's one of those things. Like, why are we having these questions 60 years later? So, and I guess that plays into my mind with this pitch, because seeing the struggles of a Reed and Sue relationship, if one was black, and how they go through that in the late 60s, early 70s, is a nice reflection on where it apparently looks like our society's heading over the next few years.
I think that's wonderful. I think certainly a route I could see Spike Lee taking, especially in the context of the MCU. So I think wonderful pitch, and especially one that comes from the heart, from a place that is so personal to you. So no, I appreciate you providing that pitch, going into that context. And like I said, you listeners, you can't see it, but I can certainly see it on your face how much a story like this would mean to you and your godson and the people in your life. For me, again, listeners, I don't go nearly as in depth in my pitches. I like giving my guests a little more free reign to do it, and I'm here to provide an ancillary option. But for mine is not a direct origin. There will be flashbacks noting to the upcoming of the Fantastic Four, and it is not part of the MCU. My Fantastic Four movie would actually be called Life on Yancey Street, and the focus is actually very solely around Omar Benson Miller as Ben Grimm and his story. And I know, Matt, you were talking about not wanting to have the adoption angle from like the Trank version, but I am with Ben Grimm. I'm actually kind of going that option where, yeah,
that makes sense.
Yes.
I can.
Right.
For me, I guess the adoption angle I was talking about is let's have one of the kids be white and one of them be
right.
black. And
right.
If
100%.
a Ben Grimm adoption could make sense, 110%.
So I do have a young Ben Grimm being adopted by a Jewish family, and he is raised on Yancey Street. And the main conflict of this film is him being torn between life as a black child and growing up into a black man, and life as a Jewish person too, because I see a lot of conflict in the Jewish community, especially younger people, his peers, having trouble, especially on the harder streets of Yancey Street that we've seen in the comic books, not take to him and give him grief and cause him struggle because of the color of his skin. And whereas the black community is giving him grief because of his Jewish faith. So he's caught in the middle between these two communities, and him trying to survive that is where I see this going. And listeners, I'm sure you know, I am a cis white male Christian. I'm trying to be very respectful here because I do not have the perspective of a black man or a Jewish person. So I'm hoping that those creating this film, the creators, such outside of my pitch in my head, would put something together that is respectful, that is from the standpoint of people who would have these experiences. So I'm not trying to come at it that I know what's going on.
No, and I appreciate that. And you want to know who we've seen touch on Judaism before?
Yeah, Spike Lee, Inside Man, and that's exactly. I mean, that's exactly
not just Inside Man, Black Klansman too.
Yes. So how I see this going is that Rami Malek's Doom. In this film, I see Dr. Doom being more of a moniker, like a nickname, than his actual name. He is essentially Omar Benson's, Ben Grimm's peer, but from the Jewish community, and is really, you see that racism and being against his blackness show up. And then eventually they both go off. They end up going to the same school where they meet Reed Richards, Sue Storm, and vicariously Johnny Storm. And that's where you'll see a flashback of the rivalry between Reed Richards and Doom. And that's where the friendship between Ben Grimm and Reed Richards develop. Is essentially Ben gives him the ropes about who this Dr. Doom is. And that's how they form this team. There's Kerry Washington comes in as another peer in the science community, eventually a love interest of Reed Richards. And this all culminates into some final conflict at the end. Like I said, I didn't flesh this out because really the impetus of the film is the Ben Grimm story, the conflict between these two communities that he's part of, and how it all culminates into the Fantastic Four forming due to...
And see, our pictures are similar in that way because we rather focus on the human side of
right.
And I get, I know a lot of people did not like Inhumans. I really enjoyed that. Once I loved it.
I will admit, I did not watch it.
It's on Disney Plus now, Dan. Come on.
Again, it's been told to me that it's so terrible. I mean, so I just
if you like it, like Jeff liked it. I know Jeff enjoyed it. A lot of people. A lot of comic fans are the ones who didn't, or like the comic book movie fans are the ones that it didn't have the boom boom explode, but it's a very human story, and very human stories, if you haven't been able to tell based off what I've said, what I like in Marvel, are what get me. And that's why I'm really digging your pitch, because it's a very human story where they're putting the superhero stuff second. And that's why I'll say it right now. I knew after my first time seeing the Batman, that was my favorite movie of all time, because that's how I felt the character should have been done all these years. It had the detective side, but it was a human story at the core of it. So human stories are what always are the way to get to me.
Yeah.
And your pitch is just that to me. And I'd love to see that film.
And I mean, Ben Grimm is one of my all-time favorite characters. I relate in a lot of ways, not necessarily his background, but his personality. I relate a lot to Ben Grimm. So that's why I was drawn to this and wanted to do a movie that featured him more heavily than the other Fantastic Four members, more so than Doctor Doom. I wanted the conflict to be his environment more so than a big mastermind villain. And ultimately, it's his struggle, his experiences that help lead to the Fantastic Four rather than some cosmic event. And that's what I think that's another route I could see Spike Lee going if he were to take on a movie like this.
No, 110%. And maybe realistically, you go and I could take a page from you and put it in my page. Maybe I could amend my pitch to the fact that the first half is in the 70s. They end up in the quantum realm, and the second half they're back, and that's when they come out and they have these new powers. And
hey, certainly.
That'd be the perfect way to do it, because you get that human element to him still, and then fish out of water, readjusting. I mean, there's multiple ways you can go with their story overall, and I think you hit on some really powerful stuff, and I appreciate that, because not a lot of other people would, especially when you have to think inside a box, like, how would Spike do this?
Right. And I think with both of our pitches, whether you're going MCU focused like you are, or a variation like I went, I think it's important to realize that, or I look at the Fantastic Four as the building blocks for Marvel superheroes, where there's some closet-minded people that are like, oh, they have to be white, they have to be X, they have to be Y, they have to be Z. To me, they are the original putty for Marvel, and with their powers, their family dynamics, their backgrounds, their villains. Those are foundational pieces. They're not the whole building.
Exactly.
And I think that's why I wanted to do the show in general. And one of the reasons I'm so glad we did a Spike Lee episode too, because again, compared to some of the other directors we've done, very divergent compared to some of the other directors we've done before. So that's why I enjoy doing this. I hope you've enjoyed exploring this.
This is great.
But before we do close out, we are getting close to the end. Any final thoughts, whether cast pitches, before I go into closing remarks?
I guess it's funny enough, this makes me think about what I have a feeling Marvel's going to do with, and what's been rumored they're going to do with the X-Men, because you can't do the Holocaust. So what makes the most sense? Civil rights. Yep. For some people who don't know, Magneto and Professor X are based off of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Right.
The most logical thing in that case would be to kind of take what Dan and I did here and apply that to them, because you're gonna, whether people like it or not, probably gonna be black men.
Yeah.
At least I'd hope so. And I've talked to some people in the Jewish community who hate the change. I've talked to some people in the Jewish community, like Maxwell Haddad, who's a part of this I'm part of our community in general. Yeah. And he's like, no, it makes the most logical sense. You can still have him be you can still have Magneto be a black Jew. There are those.
I mean, that's what I did with the thing in this movie.
Exactly. So, but you factor in stuff like that, and it's like, like, I'm excited for the future of Marvel in general, and I'm really excited to see these characters on the big screen. You've just got my head spinning in a million different ways Marvel wise, and I guess that's why I just brought up X-Men. But I appreciate this show and what you're doing, because it's honestly really cool, and it's a dope idea, and it's fun. And yeah, everybody's done a Fantastic Four fan cast. I know we did one on Watt December of 2020. We did an episode on it.
And that's the thing. That's how I tried to differentiate it. My goal wasn't to, how would we do the MCU? What should the MCU do? It's how would
you like to see?
Or really, how would these directors make a superhero movie? And it's just, again, with the Fantastic Four as the Lego blocks.
I appreciate that. And realistically, they're better analogy. They're the action figures, and the directors of the kids playing with them. Right. Just make what story you want. And I mean, how many times did you make up a story with action figures you had as a kid?
All the time. I have a box somewhere in my mom's place of old action figures still, so might need to go find those. I'm not a 32-year-old man. It's okay.
I'm not a 27-year-old man who buys action figures still, but it's okay.
Respect. I think that's a good wrapping point. That is our fan castings, our pitches for a Spike Lee helmed Fantastic Four movie. We hope you, the listeners, enjoyed our exploration into this what if scenario. I want to make special note that the Fancast at Four podcast is hosted for free on Anchor, and we encourage you, if you have your own podcast idea, to check out Anchor. It is a great resource for getting your idea off the ground. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you are listening on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and commenting with who your Spike Lee fan cast would be, on what your thoughts of our lists are, what your thoughts on our pitches are, and on which director you might want to see next. I also want to thank Matt Hart and Maddie Gunner for our fantastic theme music they created for us. And I certainly want to thank you, Matt, for being my guest today. I hope you had fun.
Oh, I had a ton of fun. You already heard me. I'll gush. Like, you don't want to hear me go gush again?
And that is our show. Thank you so much for listening. I am your host, Dan Bettenhausen. And on behalf of my guest, Matt Thomas, I hope you all have a fantastic day.